They never told you where the prison was. They just taught you how to smile inside it. You've been walking through life thinking you're free, dressing the way you think is cool, saying the things you think will land, holding the door open, paying the bill, trying not to be too much or too little. But deep down, you know it. You feel it every time you check your phone to see if she texted back. Every time you change your tone just to avoid sounding too eager. Every time you wonder, did I say too much? Was I too soft? Too intense? This is the trap no one talks about. Not a prison of bars, but of mirrors. Mirrors in her eyes, in society's gaze, in your own reflection, and every one of them is silently asking the same question. Are you enough? The truth is brutal. You've been conditioned to believe that your value as a man is proven when a woman chooses you, not when you choose yourself, not when you build something real, but when she nods in approval, when she stays, when she smiles, when she says, I love you. It doesn't matter how successful you are. You could be fit, sharp, even admired. But if a woman doesn't want you, it feels like failure, doesn't it? This isn't about love. This is about dependence, about identity. Somewhere along the way, you started believing that the highest reward for being a good man was being wanted, and so you became an actor, a shapeshifter. You learned how to be safe, agreeable, impressive, all so that someone out there someday might look at you and say, you are worth loving. But what if I told you something dangerous, something uncomfortable? What if chasing her validation is the reason you feel so empty? Because that's the thing. Most men aren't chasing love. They're chasing redemption, a sense of worth that was never given to them, a silent scream that says, please see me, because they never learned how to see themselves. And that scream, it's costing you everything. It's why you feel anxious after dates, why you replay conversations at night, why rejection feels like a death sentence instead of a closed door, because it's not about her, it's about what she represents. She becomes the judge, the mirror, the savior. But here's the raw truth. When you outsource your self-worth, you surrender your freedom, and the world, especially the romantic world, can smell it. When your value depends on being chosen, you will do anything to be picked. You'll silence your truth. You'll hide your anger. You'll laugh when it hurts. You'll give more than you want to. You'll stay when it's killing you. Because somewhere deep inside, a part of you still believes, if I lose her, I lose myself. That's not love. That's imprisonment. It's not just about romance. It's about who you are without it. Who you are when no one is watching. Do you even know that version of yourself? Because if you don't, if your worth only exists when someone else validates it, you're not living, you're performing. And what happens to a man who performs for too long? He forgets his own lines. He forgets the sound of his own voice. He starts thinking the applause is the truth. And one day, when the curtain drops and the crowd leaves, he realizes he doesn't know who he is without the stage. That's why Diogenes, the Greek madman with nothing, was freer than most modern men with everything. Because he didn't need the world's approval. He didn't need a woman's gaze to tell him he was enough. He looked at the sun and said, move. You're blocking my light. That's power. That's presence. That's freedom. And you've spent years trading your truth for attention. It's not your fault. You were taught that being wanted equals being worthy. But it's time to ask the question that most fear. What if no one chooses me? Would you disappear? Would you collapse? Or would you finally meet yourself? That's where this story begins. Not in their eyes, but in yours. Look closer. Not at what you say, but how you say it. Not at what you wear, but why you wear it. The cologne, the watch, the playlist on your phone, the carefully worded messages, the perfectly timed replies. You think it's just who you are, but if we strip it all back, are you sure? You've become a master of the role, the funny one, the charming one, the spiritual one, the emotionally intelligent guy who listens, the safe man, the reliable man, the one who never causes waves, the one who knows how to say the right things at the right time, the one who's been applauded for being different from other guys. But that applause is a leash, because the moment you step outside the script, when you express anger, or desire, or silence, or boundaries, the role breaks. And with it, so does your sense of being enough. All this is the trap. You've confused self-development with self-abandonment. You keep asking, how can I be better? But underneath that question, there's a hidden cry. What version of me will finally make them stay? You weren't born this way. You were made this way. You were made this way. You were taught that being soft earns affection, that being harmless earns praise, that shrinking earns safety. And so you adjusted. You censored. You shaved off your edges until you became smooth enough to hold, but slippery enough to never be seen. You wear the mask so well now, you probably don't even realize it's on. And the worst part, everyone sees it, especially the women you want so badly to impress, because nothing repels more than performance. Even if the lines are perfect, even if you play the role flawlessly, it's the need they smell, it's the emptiness between your words, it's the silence behind the eyes that says please choose me, I'll become anything. But let's be honest, how long can you keep that up? How long can you keep being agreeable instead of authentic? How many more dates will you spend pretending to be slightly more enlightened, slightly more successful, slightly more emotionally available than you actually are, just to keep the connection alive? The answer is simple. As long as your identity depends on being loved, you will never be honest, because honesty risks rejection. And for you, rejection doesn't just sting, it shatters. You don't just fear losing her. You fear what that loss would reveal about you. You fear the silence after she walks away, the echo that says, I told you you weren't enough, but let me offer you something else, a raw truth. Every moment you perform for approval is a moment you abandon yourself, and you can't build self-respect on a foundation of self-abandonment. That's why you feel exhausted. That's why something always feels off, even in relationships that seem healthy. That's why deep intimacy terrifies you, because intimacy isn't just about being seen by someone else. It's about being seen by you, when you're no longer performing. This is what Diogenes knew. He didn't act. He didn't adapt. He didn't audition. He didn't beg to be understood. He lived as he was, without compromise. People called him a madman. Why? Because he refused the performance. He slept in the open, insulted kings, rejected power. He didn't dress to impress, or speak to seduce. He simply was. And in that he had more power than the richest man in Athens. So the question is not, how can I become more attractive? The real question is, can I live without being liked? Can you? Because the answer to that question holds the key to everything. History doesn't remember Diogenes because he conquered kingdoms. It remembers him because he didn't need to. While other men spent their lives chasing gold, status, and admiration, Diogenes did something unthinkable. He walked away from it all, from praise, from power, from the illusion of being somebody. He didn't write books. He didn't seek followers. He didn't build empires. He slept in a barrel. He owned nothing but a cloak, a walking stick, and a bowl, which he threw away after seeing a child drink water with his hands. He said, "A child has beaten me in simplicity. Now ask yourself, who wins? The man who owns everything and still feels empty, or the man who owns nothing and feels free?" When Alexander the Great, the most powerful man on earth, stood before Diogenes and offered him anything he desired, Diogenes didn't kneel. He didn't flatter. He didn't even look impressed. He simply said, "Move aside. You're blocking my son." That wasn't disrespect. That was power. Real power. The kind that doesn't come from dominance, but from self-sufficiency. You see, Diogenes didn't crave admiration. That's why he could never be humiliated. He didn't need love. That's why he couldn't be manipulated. He didn't fear rejection. That's why he was invincible. And can you say the same? Can you look the world in the eye and say, "I want nothing from you. I already have what I need"? Because until you can, you're still in chains. The modern man brags about freedom, but his actions are a performance for attention. His gym body, a performance. His career ambition, a performance. His woke sensitivity, a performance. All because deep down, he's terrified of not being chosen. But Diogenes, he didn't perform, he exposed. Not just society but himself. He barked at hypocrisy. He spit on false morality. He lived raw, unfiltered, and unashamed, not because he was rebellious, but because he refused to play a game where the prize was slavery dressed as success. Imagine this, a man who sleeps on the street, but still walks like a king, because his dignity didn't come from outside approval. It came from something most men have never touched: radical self-ownership. That's what makes him dangerous. That's why they called him mad, because he shattered the mirror that told men, you are what they think of you. He didn't need the mirror. He already knew who he was. But you check your reflection in her eyes. You wait for her to smile before you believe you're enough. You mold yourself to be desirable, thinking that's strength. But it's not. It's dependency. It's a leash disguised as love. You're terrified of being alone because alone means confronting that aching void inside, the one that says, without her, I am nothing. But Diogenes, he sat with that void, slept with it, stared into it, and then he found something most men will never find: peace, not comfort, not popularity, not a life filled with soft kisses and hand-holding, but the peace of a man who cannot be broken, because he has nothing left to prove. That's what you've been missing. You think you need more validation, more affection, more applause. But maybe what you need is less pretending, less performing, less proving. Maybe you need to stop asking what will make them love me, and start asking who am I when there's no one left to impress, because the man who can answer that is finally free. You don't crave love, you crave a mirror, a reflection, a sign that says, you're finally enough. And where do you look for that reflection? In her eyes, in her approval, in the way she laughs at your jokes, holds your hand, says your name like it means something. But here's the truth you've been too afraid to face: what you're chasing isn't connection, it's confirmation. Confirmation that you matter, that you exist, that you're not invisible. It's not love, it's addiction. You've built your entire emotional ecosystem around being seen, being wanted, being needed. Because somewhere deep in your past you internalized a silent equation: her attention equals sign, my worth. So you feed on it. Little doses of dopamine every time she replies, every time she compliments you, every time she touches your arm and says, you're different. But when the replies slow down, when her tone shifts, when she pulls away even slightly, you collapse, not just emotionally, existentially, because her silence feels like erasure. Without her gaze, you feel like nothing, like a ghost waiting to be noticed. This is the addiction. It's not to her body, it's not to her mind, it's to the identity you see reflected in her attention. And once you're hooked, she becomes less a partner and more a mirror you can't live without. So you do whatever it takes to keep the image intact. You adjust, you overthink, you sacrifice, you give more than you want to, you say yes when you want to say no. You make yourself smaller, softer, safer, because deep down, you're terrified of disappearing again. But the truth is, you already have. You've disappeared under layers of strategies, of personas, of emotional bargaining chips. And it shows. She sees it, even if she can't name it. That hunger, that desperate echo in your voice, that subtle need that turns every conversation into a transaction. Do I still matter to you? Please tell me I still matter. But no one can fill that hole for you. Not forever. Not consistently. Not without eventually resenting the weight you've placed on their shoulders. Because what you're asking isn't love, it's salvation. You're not seeking a partner. You're seeking a savior. And that is too much weight for any human to carry. This is why your relationships implode. This is why you fall harder than you should. Why every breakup feels like dying. Because you weren't just in love. You were dependent on her validation to feel whole. And when she leaves, she doesn't just walk away with your time or your memories. She walks away with the version of you that only existed in her eyes. That's why it hurts so badly. That's why you feel like you're breaking. Because you never learned to see yourself without someone else's mirror. But Diogenes, he didn't just shatter the mirror. He laughed at it. He understood something most men never will. That the moment your self-worth is tied to being seen, you become a slave. He didn't ask for admiration. He didn't beg for recognition. He didn't barter affection with performance. He simply existed, as he was. And if the world didn't like it, he didn't care. That's not indifference. That's freedom. And until you reach that point, you'll keep chasing faces trying to catch the high that comes from being desired. But highs always crash, and every crash leaves you emptier than before. This is the cycle. Attention becomes oxygen, and when it's gone you suffocate. But what if you could breathe without it? What if you could look in the mirror and say, I don't need anyone to see me, because I finally see myself? That's not arrogance. That's healing. That's liberation. That's the first step toward becoming the man you were always meant to be. Not the one shaped by her gaze, but the one who burns with his own fire. There's a boy inside you. He's quiet, but he's always been there, watching, waiting. He's the one who sat by the window, hoping someone would finally notice. The one who did everything right. The one who learned to be good, helpful, soft-spoken, invisible when it mattered, and loud only when it pleased others. And he's still here, underneath the grown-up clothes, the dating strategies, the ambition. He never left. He just got better at hiding. You think you're chasing love. You're not. You're chasing repair. Because somewhere in your story, long before her, long before any woman you ever dated, there was a moment you were made to feel like you weren't enough. Maybe your father never looked at you with pride. Maybe your mother's love was conditional, only shown when you behaved just right. Maybe you were the quiet one who didn't get picked, or the loud one who got told to calm down. Somewhere, you got the message. You're too much, and also not enough. And from that moment forward, you started building a self that would finally earn approval, building a mask that would finally be loved. You didn't grow up. You grew around the wound, and that wound, it became your compass. It told you who to become. It told you when to speak. It told you what to suppress. It whispered, if they love you, you matter. If they leave you, you don't. So now, here you are, a man, still seeking what the boy never received, safety, in someone else's arms. This is why you cling so hard, why you can't walk away, even when she disrespects you, why you tolerate humiliation, why you bend your voice, your values, your truth, just to keep her from leaving. Because if she leaves, it won't just be rejection. It will feel like abandonment. It will feel like that child, being forgotten all over again. But here's what no one tells you. Women can't heal you. Not from this. They can hold you. They can support you. But they can't rewrite your story. That's your job. And as long as you expect her to do that, to be your emotional mother, your redeemer, your reason for being, you will keep suffocating every relationship you enter. Because you don't want a partner. You want a parent. You want someone to tell you you're good, that you're strong, that you matter. But no amount of affection can fix what you refuse to face. That boy inside you, he doesn't need a girlfriend. He doesn't need a soulmate. He needs you. He needs the man you are now, not to perform for love, but to finally give it, without conditions. To say, you are enough, even if no one else says it. You are seen, even when the world ignores you. You are worthy, even if she never comes back. That's where the healing begins. And that's where Diogenes returns. He didn't just reject society. He rejected the idea that anyone else could define him. He looked at emperors and beggars with the same eyes. He didn't bow. He didn't beg. Because there was no boy inside him, still waiting to be told he mattered. He had already told himself. And that's why he was free. So let me ask you something dangerous. When you say, I just want to be loved, is that really love you want? Or is it proof? Proof that you aren't broken. Proof that you're still someone. Proof that the people who ignored you were wrong. But here's the twist. Until you stop needing the proof, you'll never believe it. Because even if she stays, even if she loves you completely, you won't trust it. Because the boy inside you will always wonder when it's going to be taken away. This is why men self-sabotage. This is why we cheat, ghost, implode, or disappear just when things feel safe. Because love isn't just intimacy, it's confrontation. It confronts all the lies we believed about ourselves. And if we're not ready to face them, we'll burn down the very thing we wanted most. So stop asking for love to fix you. Fix yourself, so that love becomes a gift, not a cure.
There's a kind of love that doesn't heal you. It drains you. It devours you slowly. Not with cruelty, but with dependency. It feels like romance. It looks like passion. But it's not love. It's need.
It's survival disguised as connection. You enter with hope, but underneath there's hunger, not for her touch, not even for her presence, but for the feeling that she fills something, that ache, that gap, that wordless loneliness you carry when the room is quiet and no one's calling. So you attach, hard, fast, desperately. You build castles in your head, you imagine futures, you pour your time, energy, your soul, into keeping her close. But what you're really doing is trying to quiet the panic that says, if she leaves I disappear again. So you grip tighter, you become agreeable, you apologize too quickly, you stop asking for what you want, you accept crumbs, and call it kindness. You rewrite your boundaries, until the version of you that enters the relationship is unrecognizable by the end. And the worst part, you call this sacrifice. You call this maturity. You call this love. But it's not. Love built on emptiness doesn't expand you. It shrinks you. You become less honest, less spontaneous, less you, because you're always watching for signs that she might go. You overanalyze her tone. You obsess over her replies. You twist yourself into someone more lovable, and you lose yourself. That's not love. That's erasure. That's fear wearing perfume. Because when you need someone to complete you, you don't enter as a whole, you enter as a gap, and that gap can't hold anything real. It only clings, collapses and consumes. It's why your relationships feel intense at first, then unstable, then unbearable. Because what begins in hunger always ends in heartbreak. This is where most men get lost. They think, if I just love her harder, if I just do more, she'll finally stay. But the truth is, she feels your emptiness. She may not know how to name it, but she senses that she's not being loved. She's being leaned on, not admired, but worshipped, not met, but depended on. And that weight, it breaks the spine of connection, because no one wants to be the oxygen keeping another person alive. Diogenes understood this. He didn't need affection to validate him. He didn't need applause. He didn't barter himself for company. Because he had already made peace with the silence, with the emptiness, and in that silence, he found something stronger than any romance: sovereignty. That's the difference. A man who has faced his own emptiness no longer needs to fill it with someone else. He can love, deeply, but from fullness, from freedom, not from the panic of being alone. Ask yourself, would you still want her if you didn't need her? If the answer is no, it was never love to begin with. It was strategy, a search for self-worth disguised as chemistry. And that kind of love is always fragile, because the moment she changes, withdraws, disagrees, your whole sense of identity is threatened. You crumble, not because she hurt you, but because her rejection revealed a truth you didn't want to face. You never really believed you were whole without her. So what's the way out? It's not to stop loving. It's to stop needing love to feel alive. It's to stand in front of the mirror, without performance, without filters, and say, even if no one chooses me, I choose myself. That's not detachment. That's real intimacy. Because only when you are full on your own, can love become a gift, not a transaction. You stop saying, please stay so I can feel okay, and start saying, I'm okay, and I'd love to share this peace with you. That's the shift, from begging to sharing, from fear to presence, from performance to power. There is a kind of man who walks into a room and changes nothing, and yet everything shifts. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't beg for attention. He doesn't try to impress, but something about him makes people pause. Why? Because he doesn't need them. And in a world built on desperate wanting, that kind of presence feels almost divine. We've been taught that power is loud, that it roars, dominates, competes, conquers, but real power, the kind that can't be taken, bought or broken, that comes from the absence of need. And that's why Diogenes was one of the most powerful men who ever lived. He didn't wear robes. He didn't sit on a throne. He didn't command armies. He simply didn't care what others thought he needed to be. And in doing so, he shattered the very illusion that enslaves most men. The illusion that we must be desirable to be valuable, that we must be praised to be right, that we must be chosen to be whole. But here's the secret the world doesn't want you to know. When you stop needing, you start choosing. And when you start choosing, you take back your life. The man who needs nothing can't be manipulated. He can't be seduced by flattery. He can't be baited by guilt. He can't be bought with praise or paralyzed by rejection. He becomes untouchable, not because he's numb, but because he's anchored. Imagine that. Imagine walking through life without calculating your every move based on how she might react. Imagine saying what you mean, without fear of pushing someone away. Imagine looking at someone you love, and knowing that if they leave, you'll still stand tall, not because it didn't hurt, but because it didn't break you. That's real power. That's not arrogance. That's self-possession. And yet, most men are terrified of it. They would rather be needed than be free. They would rather be validated than be sovereign. Because with freedom comes silence. With silence comes reflection. And with reflection comes truth. And here's the truth. Most of your life has been a strategy to avoid being alone. You built your sense of worth through women, work, praise, status, anything to fill the space where your own self-worth should have lived. But Diogenes, he stripped it all away. He stood naked before the world and said, "This is who I am. I need nothing from you." And that's why even Alexander the Great, with his armies and empires, stood before him and offered him a gift. Because when you no longer crave approval, the world can't figure you out. And what it can't understand, it respects. It's paradoxical, isn't it? The more you chase love, the more it eludes you. The more you kneel, the more you're overlooked. The more you perform, the less authentic you become, and the further real connection slips away. But the moment you stop chasing, stop proving, stop needing, that's when something changes, not just around you, but within you. You become magnetic, not because of what you say or do, but because of what you don't need. You're no longer a man trying to impress. You're a man who knows who he is, and that is rare, and that is dangerous, and that is free. So ask yourself, are you living for approval, or are you living for truth? Because every time you beg for love, you forget your worth. Every time you adapt your truth to be more acceptable, you trade your soul for security. And every time you perform to be wanted, you bury the real you a little deeper. But that man, the one underneath the need, he's still there, and he's waiting for you to stop chasing, so he can finally rise. There's a mirror you walk past every day. You see it, you glance, you move on, but you don't really look. Because deep down, you already know what's hiding behind your own eyes. You know there's something broken there. Not in a dramatic Hollywood tragic way, but in a quiet, aching, invisible kind of way. The kind of wound that doesn't bleed, but hums beneath everything you do. It's in the way you check your phone, the way your chest tightens when she takes too long to reply, the way you try to stay busy, anything to avoid the silence. But the silence is where the truth lives. And the truth is this: you don't know who you are when no one's looking. You know who you are in her gaze. You know who you are at work. You know who you are when someone validates you, but alone, in a room with no feedback, no audience, no admiration. That's when it gets dangerous. Because in that moment, you come face to face with the version of you you've spent your whole life avoiding. The insecure boy, the one who never felt seen, the one who still believes that if he's not desired, he disappears. That's why you keep moving. That's why you chase relationships. That's why you perform on dates. That's why you download and delete the apps over and over again. Because you're terrified of sitting still. Because stillness leads to self-reflection, and reflection reveals the lie, that your worth has always been conditional. But what if it wasn't? What if everything they told you, that your value came from being useful, attractive, charming, needed, was false? What if you were already enough, just by existing? The problem isn't that you're alone. The problem is you've never learned how to be alone, without it feeling like failure. Because society has trained you to believe that solitude equals sadness, that if no one desires you, something's wrong, that if you're not being chosen, you're invisible. But Diogenes, he didn't just tolerate solitude, he ran toward it. He embraced the silence, he slept in it, he let it burn away everything that wasn't true. And when the world mocked him, ignored him, misunderstood him,
He didn't flinch, because the mirror he looked into every morning didn't lie. That's what you're running from. Not rejection, not loneliness, not even failure. You're running from yourself, from the confrontation that comes with asking, if I stop performing, if I stop pleasing, who am I, really? That's a terrifying question, because it means letting go of every mask you've worn, the confident one, the romantic one, the perfect one. It means burning the character you've played, and sitting in the ashes until something real rises. That's not depression, that's rebirth, that's transformation. But most men never get there. They stay stuck in cycles, begging, performing, collapsing, repeating, because they never dared to break the mirror. But if you can stand there, look into your own eyes, and say I see you, all of you, and I choose you anyway, then everything changes. Because from that place, love no longer feels like salvation, it feels like sharing. You're no longer asking someone to fix the hole inside you. You're saying, I filled it myself, and now I want to give, not take. And that is the kind of man no one can control, not with silence, not with sex, not with rejection, because his reflection no longer lives in their eyes. It lives in his own. When love doesn't fill the void, men chase legacy. When affection fails to anchor their identity, they build altars of achievement. They don't call it addiction, they call it purpose. But most of what we call purpose today is just fear in a better outfit. Fear of being forgotten, fear of being irrelevant, fear of being alone, not just physically, but existentially. So we build, we chase titles, money, recognition, we grind, we hustle, we sacrifice sleep, time, peace, and we tell ourselves, I'm doing this for meaning. But peel it back, and you'll see the truth most men will never say aloud. If I can't be loved, at least let me be admired. If I can't be held, at least let me be remembered. That's not purpose. That's bargaining. That's a transaction with the void inside you. A desperate deal with the fear that one day you'll die, and no one will care. And so you try to matter. To her, to them, to the world. But the more you chase that feeling, the more you lose yourself, because everything becomes a performance again. Now you're not performing for a woman. You're performing for history. Legacy becomes another stage. You post, you pose, you collect applause, you achieve. But you never arrive. Because the you doing it all was never real. Just another mask. Another illusion built to distract from the emptiness you're afraid to face. And what happens when the crowd leaves? When your followers forget you? When your success doesn't make the silence any quieter? You collapse. Because none of it was built on something solid. It was built on your refusal to be invisible. But Diogenes, he didn't care if anyone remembered him. He didn't write books. He didn't chase a legacy. He didn't stand on stages. He stood in himself. And because of that, history never forgot him. Not because he chased it, but because he didn't. That's the paradox. The men who desperately want to be remembered usually aren't. The men who stop trying to impress become unforgettable, because they lived something rare, truth. Diogenes didn't serve a narrative. He didn't invent a polished identity. He didn't curate a story. He simply lived, fully, honestly, unapologetically, and the world couldn't look away. So let me ask you, what are you building? And who are you building it for? Is your dream yours, or was it handed to you by a father who never said, I'm proud, a mother who never said you're enough, a culture that told you only the powerful deserve peace? Because if you're not building from within, you're building a prison with your own hands, a shiny one, with success, and praise, and admiration, but still, a prison. Because you'll never rest, you'll never breathe, you'll never sit still, because stillness would mean meeting the man you really are. And that's the one person you've been avoiding all along. The tragedy, you already are someone. You always were. But no one ever taught you how to just be. They taught you how to chase, how to earn, how to prove, but never how to sit, how to breathe, how to be silent, and not feel threatened by it. And that silence, that's where purpose actually lives. Not in legacy, not in applause, not in being remembered, but in being real. And from that reality, you don't need to chase meaning. You become it. So here you are, at the end of the chase, At the edge of all your strategies, the charm, the hustle, the sacrifice, the striving to be loved, to be seen, to be remembered. You've tried it all, and you're tired, because it never gave you what you truly needed. Not love, not applause, not even purpose. What you needed was yourself, not the polished version, not the perfect one they liked, not the man you perform as, but the one who remains when everything else is stripped away. That man, he's still in there, beneath the roles, beneath the fear, beneath the pain, and he is waiting, not for love, not for approval, but for you, to finally stop running and come home. But to meet him, something must die. The need to please, the fear of rejection, the addiction to being needed, the identity built on who you are to others. It all has to burn. And yes, it will hurt, because for most men solitude isn't just silence. It's surgery. It cuts deep. It reveals wounds you forgot you had. It exposes how fragile your self-worth really is when no one is clapping. That's why you avoid it. Because you've confused solitude with loneliness. But they are not the same. Loneliness is the ache of being disconnected. Solitude is the power of being whole. And Diogenes knew that. That's why he could sleep under the stars, walk barefoot in the dirt, speak his truth to kings, and die without a name on a building. Because he had something more rare than love, more lasting than legacy. He had freedom. Freedom from needing. Freedom from performing. Freedom from the silent scream that says, "Please tell me I matter." You can have that too. But not by chasing another woman. Not by posting another win. Not by posting another win. Not by becoming more desirable. You get it by stopping, sitting, facing the stillness, and asking, who am I, when I don't need to be loved? The answer might break you, but in that breaking, something new is born. A man who no longer begs, who no longer performs, who no longer trades his authenticity for affection. A man who gives love, not because he needs it back, but because he's overflowing. That man, he walks differently. He speaks without fear. He enters a room not to be chosen, but to simply be. And when he loves, it's not from emptiness, it's from abundance. That's the revolution they don't want you to have. Because a man who doesn't need to be loved can't be controlled, not by the world, not by women, not even by his past. So burn the character. Let the illusion die. And when the ashes settle, don't rush to rebuild. Sit there, in the silence, in the solitude, and listen for the one voice that's always been drowned out by the noise. Your own. You were never meant to be a puppet, a pleaser, a reflection in someone else's eyes. You were meant to be a man, whole, unshaken, and finally, free.